So you know what you're here for. Yeah? No. Listen, I came because my wife. All right, but you know what workshop you're here for. Yeah? No. We here, you all come to learn the willow, my daughter's newest dance. Okay. We are here for, I want to welcome you to Catching Hell in the Hallway, right? Moving through life's transition. So are you in the right place?
Yes.
I'm just doing a gut check. Now, I want to say, first and foremost, for some of you, that's a very interesting title, The Catching Hell in the Hallway, and I did not come up with that, okay? So I got Catching Hell in the Hallway from AA. It is an AA term, and usually they say a phrase that goes something like this. When one door closes, another one opens. But man, if we don't catch hell in the hallway. So catching hell in the hallway is a term that really applies to the in-between spaces of our lives, those periods of transition or change, when the existing reality, the known world, no longer fits, but the new world isn't yet fully present. Make sense? Right? It's that in-between place. Now, how many of us can relate to that? How many of us have been in a hallway? Right? How many of us are still in a hallway? Hello. All right? And the beauty about this is that life is full of hallways. Life is full of hallways. So we're not here, this workshop is not going to tell you how you can get out of hallways, because it's just not going to happen. Right? The natural order of things is change. So whatever the static state is, whatever the steady state, this is what it is. Whatever your equilibrium is, if you live long enough, it will be disrupted. Because that is the nature of life. It is constantly changing and evolving. So we're not here necessarily to focus on the particulars of the change that you and I are experiencing. That's useful. But the bigger question that we're asking ourselves is not, how can I fix this particular circumstance in my life? That's not the biggest question. The biggest question is, what kind of approach to change can I adopt, can I use, that helps me work with the change in my life, as opposed to being reduced by or defeated by the changes in my life? Are you with me? That's the bigger question. So you may each have your particulars. I have my particulars. But we want to process. We want to process for greeting change and growing with it. And there are whole bunches of people in our world, ourselves included, at different times in our lives, who have greeted change and run from it. Not flowed with it, but we run from it, or we try to shut it out. And most of us, if we're awfully honest with ourselves, we'll see that those efforts were futile. It's sort of like the board, for anybody who ever watched Star Trek. The board in Star Trek would say resistance is futile. Right? So the resistance to change takes a lot of effort from us. And it doesn't really work. So we're looking for an alternative. Yes?
For me, I kind of want to be, I'm not resisting any change, but I kind of want to be the catalyst for my own change.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And that's the working with. That's the working with, because the impulse to change is a natural one, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen an infant that just stayed an infant. It is not in the order of things, right? There is a maturation process that takes place, right? And a good deal of that happens unconsciously. But the older and more mature we become, the more we are asked to engage in it consciously. Consciously. So it's not just happening beneath the surface, but we are willing it. We are aligning our will with the natural process of change.
Sometimes you know that you need to change, and you know things are going to change. However, you're so comfortable with the status quo that you panic at the thought of having to go with that change and not knowing where that change is going to take you. And you're very comfortable with the status quo. So a lot of times it's not that you don't want to change, it's that it's just very uncomfortable to move with the flow.
Absolutely. Right, and so the words that I use for that are two words. There's the familiar and there's the fulfilling. Right, so what happens is we stick with the familiar long after it ceases being fulfilling because it is familiar. Even if you use a metaphor where you can see that the familiar is like a barbed wire, right? So there becomes a point at which the familiar becomes painful because it doesn't fit. Or it's like those cute shoes that I just took off, right? Real cute, but super tight, not really meant for walking, right? So the appearance of the life feels good, but the function of the life doesn't work. And we are holding on to barbed wire with bleeding hands. Right? There's some sort of psychological discomfort, if not physical or emotional discomfort. And we're still holding on because we know it. Sort of like the devil we know is better than the one we don't. We don't know what we are calling into creation yet. We just know that what we have doesn't feel good, but I've got a greater sense of control. And that's the attachment. The attachment is to the greater sense of control. Now, interestingly enough, I said sense of control, not control. And there is a difference. Because we're not really as in control as we think of what's happening right now. We just have this sense. So, I want to step back for a moment and say this again as a disclaimer. I am not going to be sharing with you anything today that you don't know. My hope is that I'm saying it in a way that helps you remember, recollect, move it from the back burner to the front burner, and take even greater conscious action on it. That's what we're trying to do. Because all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom, all of this truth, all of this blah, 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 has been here for millennia, if not longer. And it's come up probably in every human civilization and culture, every faith and truth tradition. It's there. So the work for us is in the moment, can we recall it, can we use it? So I'm practicing as you are practicing. We are going to practice together this evening. So the expertise is shared by the school. Now, all of us have a change story, right? Because everybody raised their hand and said, yes, I'm in the hallway. All of us have a change story. The particulars are interesting. The bigger work is how do we deal with change in general. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my change story to sort of dive us into the fundamental dynamics. So here's the hallway that I found myself in and am working through right now. Most of you know that 16 months ago, I opened an Empower Institute, like this place that we're in tonight, which is the Center for Inspiration, Transformation, and Empowerment. And it feels like it is my life's calling, right? It and whatever it will be as it grows and matures. I've been doing this for 12, 13, 14 years, unpaid. And finally it was like, hey, well, let's create a space. And in different spaces, other people's places, I've been doing this. And finally I said, hey, let's create our own space because we can do even more in this space. So I felt compelled to make a shift, right? That's 16 months ago. That's a big investment. Anytime you go from being in somebody else's space to having your own place and putting the shingle out and getting programs where you have 30 or more workshops or classes a month requires a tremendous amount of effort and investment. Now that happened, and then 2 months later my husband lost his job. And we were pretty set on using both incomes to help support what was a brand new venture. And I should say 2 months after that, we had our first child. All right, so you're beginning to see this picture, right? Brand new baby, we had planned for her and all of that, fantastic, but we had not planned for losing a job. We had planned for a business, but we had not planned for that loss of income. And with the new baby came all the joys, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to diminish the joys, okay? But also what came were more expenses. Okay, this is just the basics. They eat something. And even breast milk requires some real food at some point. Okay, so we had this baby. Now the interesting thing about my income outcome then was that I went from being full-time to being part-time. So our expenses tripled. Our household income was cut by half. So 16 months, 14 months, 12 months, and at 9 months, it hit me that I really needed to trade up my profession for my calling. That opening this place wasn't just a side thing. We wanted to be the central thing in my life. But the reality is, with most new startups, in the beginning, you're not earning a whole lot. So for every dollar I earn, we spend 4. Do the math on that. And at the same time, I'm getting this yearning to do what? To make this central. This thing that has not yet turned a profit, right? Or at least not in a material sense. In change and transformation, it's highly profitable. Right, but in the material sense, it hadn't done that yet, and I feel called, like God is saying to me, Rebecca, do this, this is right. I feel good. And I'm like, Lord, I can't do this. You know, my business background is such that I got to see the numbers work. And the numbers weren't adding up. So I said, God, here's what I need you to do. I need you to stop talking to me every day about this. Okay, that's what I need you to do. Or I need you just to take this burning desire away. Because it's not actionable. Right? The dollars and cents aren't making sense to me. And they didn't go away. Right? You can imagine that I didn't have some miraculous Hollywood intervention where all of a sudden we won the lottery. We don't play. Okay? Although I do believe we won the cosmic lottery because I have a sense of my life's purpose. Many people do not. So we didn't win the lottery. There was no easy bailout. And the desire deepened. And from that experience, I learned 3 things. Now, this is where the pens are going to be useful. Here we go. It's about our assumptions. Because the particulars of my experience are only useful because they may illuminate some of the dynamics of what's happening in your own life. So the first realization was, rarely does change call upon us at a moment of our choosing. Now, if you think I'm deep, I'm going to tell you that I got that from Transformers 2 when Omegatron was talking to that, main character guy. Okay? So that is to say, you can get wisdom and inspiration from Hollywood. Okay, they didn't exactly say change, they said faith. But it's true for change. Rarely does change call upon us at a moment of our choosing. It usually shows up at what appear to be the least opportune times, right? So there may be times when things are already bad, and we're afraid of them getting worse. Or there may be times when things are really good, and we don't want to jeopardize what it is we have. The comfort, that's what you were talking about, understand? Right? We're in a place that's fairly comfortable. It doesn't even have to be painful, it's just familiar and comfortable. Okay? So, in that instance, we don't want change to happen either. Right? But the reality is that shift happens. Now, I took that from a sister in the wrote a book called Shift Happens. Right? So I do want to give credit where credit is due. Shift happens. Period. Period. Right? There are no caveats to that. It doesn't happen on your clock. Shift happens. It happens. It happens. So whether we're ready or not is simply a part of life, right? And all of our burning desires, all of our crises, all of our new experiences are the tools that life uses to aid us in our shift. The burning desires, the discontents, right? The crises, the new experiences are tools. If we are thinking in a pedagogical sense, spiritual pedagogy, right? Tools. These are big words, but all I'm saying is these are tools that spirit or life uses to help us grow.